must say I fully concur with most of what direction. My question is that there are particular not be financed because we, to an extent, depend on funding that comes from outside. What is our plan with respect to ensuring that as we continue to insist on a proper diversified mix, which is correct, how do you address?
I've got two questions. One relates to the speak around just energy transition. My concern is that it only focuses on us, South Africans in particular, being consumer of technologies that come with that. I'm not hearing anything around how are we going to use that for our industrialization or manufacturing of particular components within those technologies, whether it's solar itself, battery storage, and other technologies. That's the first one. The second one relates to Singamagwala, Minister. Singamagwala, the reality is that you have just alluded that the onshore gas with proven reserves of onshore gas, you call it shale. I have not heard us again pushing very hard for gas-based industrialization, pushing very hard for changing the paradigm on our production architecture in the country because it's cheaper. And our government is saying nothing to that effect around pushing for that, but also to ensure that there's economic redistribution in this country and revitalize other parts of South Africa. I'll pause at that. Thank you.
Then have a last question.
Good morning, Minister. My name is Tami Magele from Leungo Education. I just want to ask, are we also making concerted efforts to make sure that as much as we want to develop our energy portfolio, what are we doing and how much are we doing in making sure that we have the correct talent and pipelining for it? As it is now in the country, we know that we have a high unemployment rate, but what we're experiencing as well is that the unemployed youth as well and the kids that are coming out of the school are not qualified at the level to start working. So in the industry itself, are we making a concerted effort to make sure that we have the right skills and level of quality of learners coming through to support the industry? Thanks.
Hi, Minister. This is Cindy Mbuteni, CEO at Kuji Consulting. I'm quite interested to understand where South Africa is in terms of Microsoft sustainability. In actual fact, I shouldn't say Microsoft. I should say sustainability management tools, particularly on accounting on carbon emissions for organizations. As a company, we are suppliers of the Microsoft sustainability technology, but we're not really understanding where government is. And we find that in the UAE, in the US, there's quite a lot of focus to understand exactly what carbon emissions are, how companies contribute to carbon emissions in South Africa, and would really like to understand a bit more from your perspective in terms of what is the plan for South Africa? When is this going to be fully legislated? And when are you going to be implementing it from a legislation perspective? Thank you so much.
Bunch. The name is Mashilo, and I can't miss this opportunity to ask the Minister. Obviously, the transition, whether just or not just, it needs capital, it needs money. And particularly on the most polluters, most of the money is trapped in what we call the social and labor plans, the SLPs. Now, we had 2.5 years in a country that money which belonged to the community as a saving. They didn't carry it over. And my understanding is that once it's being declared and the mining license is granted on the budget that that company has. That money belongs to the community. Now, as communities, we try to knock on the companies to saying, you stealing community money by considering as a saving for the company, because the community needs are not gone, they are still there. Now, we would love that from the department, from your department, Minister, there could be a way in which you can put sense to companies that community money can't be a savings to them and they declare it as their bonuses. It belongs to the community. And there must be trust established so that that money is not lying in the company corpus. Instead, it's where the community can control it through the community trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You ask all the difficult questions are difficult questions. My responsibility is to deal with the simpler ones. Where will we get funding for continuing use of coal? We must get it from you, business people, who must invest in coal. Coal is not a dirty product, it is a business. I don't know if people know that in 2021, the turnover of coal was 130 billion rand for 2021. In 2022, that increased to 252.3 billion rand. And to me, that communicates the fact that this is a business. So it is up to the business people to want to sustain those businesses. I can tell you that those who are in coal business are doing well. I know Anglo offloaded a portion of them that is on coal production and established something called Tungela. And part of it went to Seriti. Both Seriti and Tungela are doing well, their shares have improved, and any savings there must be reinvested in the coal business. In addition to that, the Africa Export Bank is establishing an energy section which will actually focus on funding fossil fuels that are in Africa. Because Africa is a continent, it is rich in fossil fuel. We're told not to touch them, but everybody else wants to touch it. So those are the two sources. Other money must come from you as business people. That only focusing on South Africa being a consumer, why are we not manufacturing? I should ask that question. You should not be asking me that question. I should ask it to you, why don't you manufacture? Black Business Council is a council of business. Is that not so, President? Now, therefore, it's your question. You should grapple with it during this summit. Why are you not manufacturing? I'm owing a small battery manufacturer in Germiston. I want to visit them. They invited me. I will go and see them. Their effort is a small company, black-owned. They're trying to expand into a manufacturing company. The more effort is put on that, the better it is for South Africa. Shale gas, government is silent on this. They are not listening. I don't talk of government, I talk of myself. I've talked about this. How many of you remember it? And a moratorium was imposed on the exploration of shale gas. We have actually tested shale gas. We've done all the requirements that were stated by the court. We've finished them now. We are now going to uplift that moratorium. Okay, when we uplift that moratorium, it means we'll open shale gas for exploration. I'm not saying that for the first time here, I'm saying that everywhere I go, and I talk about it, because I always tell engineers that I'm Nyogol, you see engineers build monuments, but it is us social scientists who pump life into those monuments. It is us who talk. I talk about this. I expect BBC to talk more about that. It is not government that is silent. It is business people who are silent. So, please add your voice to the debate. When we're taken to court by NGOs, business must come to the front and say, you're interfering with our business aspirations. You don't say that. We go to court, we appeal, we go to the highest court. On our own, business is silent. And when people accuse us of being captured by business, we feel very bad. But the reality is we are, because we take cases to court on behalf of business, and business is silent on these cases. They don't, with high unemployment, what do we do? For my sins, at one time I was chairing an institution called GIPSA, which was focusing on skills development. At that time, we're putting our fingers on the development of every category of skill. I've lost touch with it. I'm no longer there. I've done many things after that, I don't know. But skills development, I've heard many people saying, our education system is not right, it's bad, it doesn't produce the skills. I say, because I'm a product of Bantu education, I don't understand that complaint. I'm a product of Bantu education. I studied at night, 42, for my sins. I have 4 kids there. All of them are graduates. And I see their performance out there on their own. They don't work for government. And I say, what is this? What is better about this education? Because if I had this opportunity, I see with these kids, we would be very far. And number 2, we have many of these young kids who pass here, go and do postgraduate degrees anywhere across the world, and they perform outstandingly well. Then I ask my question, where is this bad education system? We're producing, you will find South African nuclear physicists present in those projects. So all we should do is to actually pay attention to people who go and get those skills. But where we are weak as a country, we allow people to go and study. We have NSFAS, we give them bonuses. We don't force them to go particular disciplines. And we find that we have oversupply of social scientists and an undersupply of hard skills. And I'm not an engineer. I'm a social scientist, okay? And I enjoy it. I think it's the best thing ever happened to me, to be a social scientist. Yeah, Ngwangwa. Uzo infiltrate business, okay, so let's, we did well, Nyogolo, you know, what's the industry, and they're doing well. He can't be in the cabinet. He's from a small party, you know. Now, and I was saying to cabinet, we are sending young people to universities, and even they're left to swim or sink. The difference that China made to itself was to send an army of young people to do new. They sent these young people at that stage. We're going to battle to match. My appeal is that the government runs no business. You run businesses. But we are responsible. We must do things, but let's work together to match the skill and the demand. If we don't do that, we're going to complain over unemployment. Actually, 7% unemployed graduates is quite a huge percentage. That must come down, but we must match that scale to the demands. Now, the sustainable management tools, we don't understand where government stands. I'm sure if you can go and talk to the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries, and Environment, they will tell you. Actually, companies get penalized for high emissions. ESCOM and Sasol know that. I hope there are people from ESCOM and Sasol here. When we're not here, they must be able to help you understand how government deals with the question of regulation of carbon emissions. It's quite a difficult issue, it's complex, and it is done, there are rules. That's why when Kusile and Kendall are not meeting those requirements, they have to apply for exam. My advice is that do link up with FFE to understand how it works. Transition needs money. Polluters spend SLP now. I would imagine you're from a mining community. So they want quick cash. They think that they can cash out SLP. SLP is not for quick cash and cashing up. It's for projects in, I don't know the person who asked the question. I can tell you that one of the busiest areas in the department is to hand out SLP projects. We're in the Eastern Cape in Tukwa. We ended up a huge high school there, J.S. Kenjan. Anybody from the Eastern Cape must go to Tukwa and see J.S. Kenjan. It's a big high school, but this is like a university. I went to Kuruman, we handed over a primary school and a high school. We went to Rustenburg, we handed over a high school and a primary school. We went to Rustenburg, we handed over a clinic. We handed over a facility of sport and many other things. We're doing that, we're quite busy in that area. But if you're from a particular area, you think that it's not working, please do leave because of COVID. Actually, during COVID, we ended a clinic in Middleburg and ended other one in Mpumalanga Far, next to the mountain, what is it called, in Babtin. We ended a clinic, world-class clinics, built by mining companies. When there was darkness in Wheatbank, it was the social labor plan that built a transformer, installed it, helped Wheatbank down. So I can give you side examples, but if in your area you think SLP is not working, please do talk to us. A group of us here will not announce that you came. Just come and talk to us. We want to know because we are pushing that area very hard and we're beginning to see. And actually we insisted and said to them, stop this thing of building small community hall there and another small community hall there. Pull your resources together. Do build impactful projects in communities. Communities must feel SLP projects in their communities. And that is beginning to happen, but for that progress to be made, talk to us. We've also equally appreciated, Kwangwa, that when you give SLP, community leaders want cash for themselves. We've discovered that they want cash from themselves. They come and the community representative, one to they drive Mercedes Benz and they are silent. And we must deal with that issue. We must deal with that issue. Social labor plan is a legislated contribution of companies to communities where they are. But examples, if you think it's not working, please do talk to us. We are available for that. Thank you. I can go down now. I can't be part of a panel.
Thank you so much, Minister Gwede Mantashe. You know, scanning the room from here, it's fascinating to see how everyone's attention has been captured. I will call upon, thank you so much, I'll call upon the Vice President of Business, Greg Mufokeng, as our next moderator. I think to all my moderators and speakers, please, let's stick to time. I've been given strict instructions to finish not a minute later than 3:15. Over to you, VPB.
Thank you very much, Program Director, the Treasurer General of the Black Business Council, Princess Tsakani Nkambule. Is she not beautiful? Akere Mufeng, please, man. Chair us down. Chair us down. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Viva BBC, viva. Forward with Black economic empowerment, forward. Forward with job creation, forward. We start here. Minister, on the issue of just energy transition, we've been one of the most vocal organizations in this country. In fact, if one has to do an analysis of our media statements, the bulk of those statements were actually issued addressing the issue of just energy transition. In fact, Jacob Maroch, Muhlompe Jacob Marocha, was speaking on our behalf, Minister. So if you saw Muhlompe Marocha speaking in various media platforms and various conferences, it was under the banner of the BBC. So we've been talking, Minister. We've issued media statements. We have addressed a lot of indabas. As the Black Business Office, that we are racist, we are anti-white, because the reader and the narrator must be fired for incompetence. We're very clear. And so we said, no, it was a question of incompetence. He has left now a couple of time. Not be accused. Colleagues, allow me then to invite on stage the panel. I will start with Comrade Pax Tau, who is here representing the African National Congress. He will be joined on stage by Mr. Bakolile Nodada, Shadow Minister of Basic Education, representing the Democratic Alliance. Let me also take this opportunity to invite on stage Mr. Ngabayomzi Ngwangwa, the DP of the United Democratic Movement. Let me also, the IFP from the EFF, Impahe, they will find us along the way. They'll find us along the way. I think, the President is here. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we are focusing on the big political corner. The debate starts now. And the question we posed to our political leaders is 20 years of the broad-based Black economy. How do we then have a growing economy? What is to be done? Mine is just to facilitate this discussion. As we all know, we vote political parties, and those political parties send their representatives to our national parliament to operate as businesses. We look forward to hearing the views of our various political parties on this very topical issue. And colleagues, we are going to give each and every one of the panelists 10 minutes to tell us what the position of their political parties is as far as this matter is concerned. First up will be Comrade Pax Tau to tell us more about what the ANC says about the subject matter. Comrade Pax, over to you.
I thank Mr. Mantashe, leaders of political parties, members of BBC, and all present this morning. Of course, I'm standing here in the stead of the Secretary General of the ANC. And I was plucked out in Tate Mantashe from Lady Smith because we are hosting a DDM function of the President and had to drive here this morning from Lady Smith. But I'm also saying this to justify why I'm underdressed for the occasion. Because it would not be the norm for me to be underdressed for the occasion. Let me start by, and I'll start my input by stating the obvious. Let me start by saying that, in fact, the African National Congress has a historic mission, which historic mission is the liberation of Black people in general, and Africans in particular. And in this regard, the issue of transformation is fundamental and existential to the role and function of the African National Congress. And transformation does not emerge from a political or policy vacuum. Its genesis lies in the struggle encapsulated in the National Liberation Movement as envisioned in the Freedom Charter. Specifically, transformation is synonymous with the Freedom Charter, where it states that the people shall share in the country's wealth, the land shall be shared amongst those who work it, and there shall be work and prosperity. Transformation is not just a South African phenomenon. Indeed, it is global and encapsulated in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, especially Goal 8, speaking to promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. In this regard, I thought I should borrow from Amartya Sen in his seminal work on development as freedom, but also from Martha Nussbaum in their emphasis of the 4 freedoms that includes political freedom, freedom in economic facility. So in essence, I'm arguing that in fact, when we're talking about freedom and or the process of liberation, that we can for all in this country, of substantial ends by the effective use of participatory capabilities by the public. And therefore for us, this part, a particular broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act has been bastardized in many ways. It is considered to be an act of an elite of people who have essentially, and there's been an underemphasis. Indeed, the importance of black men in this country is important, as was reflected on earlier. Skills development, therefore, when you are as a measured entity, measured as to whether you are level 8 or level 1, part of what is measured is your contribution, ensuring that black people gain access to higher echelons of management, both in the public and the private sector. And reversals, but there's been a significant improvement with regards to participation in management echelons. But it also talks about using a public policy tool. They incubate this targeted procurement. That constitutes part of what is broad-based Black economic empowerment. So when we measure ourselves, we must measure ourselves against all these indicators and say, yes, there's been progress, and yes, there is need to celebrate, but we are not there yet. Excuse me. But I thought before we get to even talk about some of these issues, and I'm not going to, as we've done in the presentation, listed the areas of success on by the most obvious are things that we need to disabuse ourselves of. Now I'm not going to try and guess, but I can imagine that many of the people in this room have either been a service provider, because we have accepted that, in fact, but there are all sorts of, there are two things that we have said, and we're taking this, the public and the private sector, accepting, which is the second broad-based Black economic of the architecture, if you like, of the empowerment regime in the country. And therefore, we're starting a track of work that is elements of what broad-based Black economic and fiscal instruments and implementation mechanisms.
Thank you very much, Comrade. I was asked by Mutswe. I refused that you be called, then we are not going to be called entrepreneurs. We are business people. We are entrepreneurs just like the established sector. Yes, because when they talk to the established sector, they don't call them white counterparts. We are all entrepreneurs. Marhaba Kena is okay. We can all go together. Yes. Colleagues, we had last year, as a representative of the Democratic Alliance, the current mayor of the city of Cape Town, here to listen to our brother tell us about the position of the Democratic Alliance on this very important question. Please welcome on stage the Honorable.
I see the facilitator has indirectly tried to manage my position on these things. But ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests of the Black, I don't know if Huedag applies here, but good day. Thank you for the opportunity to address you on our perspective on economic empowerment, creating jobs and growing the economy, as we review 20 years of broad-based black economic empowerment and present to you an alternative approach to BEE that we believe aligns with the intention of redress, marginalized and impoverished. Silver bullet. 7 out of 10 young people like me sit at home without work, and some solicit a life in crime. BE has proven itself that fails to prepare them for that will benefit. We should never think every single day is for many. Currently, we're failing to overcome our past. Poor governance, corruption, cadre deployment, and race-based policies have enabled elite enrichment and the disintegration of the state at the expense of broad-based prosperity, because that's what we should be focusing on. Maturity. Injustices and the glaring governance failures, and this is our proposal and our answer to the question that you put on us today. Our economic empowerment policy embraces the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them, as a framework for promoting empowerment in our country. The SDGs provide a comprehensive and globally recognized set of objectives that address poverty, inequality, education, unemployment, and other essential aspects of sustainable development. The DA will replace the current BBBEE model with the SDGs and reward businesses that make positive contribution to these goals, removing race as the only quantifiable mechanism for redress and development, and rewarding companies based on their impact on addressing poverty, health, education, inequality, unemployment, and transport, just but an example. We can prioritize the upliftment of majority who find themselves trapped in cycles of poverty, many of whom are black. Poverty is a tangible and measurable indicator that we can actually focus on. That though we can empower individuals and the focus from benefiting a selected few within the political elite to uplifting the broader population, like the people that I spoke about, that are economically empowered, but also socially inclusive and cohesive, that we don't have a select few changing white managers for black managers, whereas we need to be uplifting the society, giving them a hand up rather than a hand out. In adopting the SDGs as a guiding framework, we recognize that for true economic empowerment, we require a whole of society approach that addresses various challenges which cut across all sectors. Therefore, we must also address the root causes of poverty, inequality, and exclusion: quality education, affordable healthcare, clean, reliable energy, gender equality, and sustainable economic growth. Moreover, this alternative approach allows us to bridge the divides that race-based policies often create. It encourages collaboration and cooperation among diverse communities by aligning our efforts and partnerships that exist both nationally and internationally, amplifying the impact of our own initiatives. One of the most powerful ways government provide goods or services. Our promise, however, is that competence will take priority in procurement, as unfulfilled or poor delivered contracts hurt those inequality of opportunity, as well as broader socio-economic needs. We must be focusing on the inequality of opportunity, looking at economic income status, geographical location, school quantile, net assets, access to basic services. A good example of this is NSFAS. Their poverty and not the color of their skin. Broad economic empowerment, Gs, APIs, either in education, in employment, or in those particular communities in which they do business. We know what stands in the way of economic inclusion and inequality and circumstances. Seeing the devastation of the people in Kolobeni just this week, who are completely locked out of broad-based economic empowerment and think that their economic prospects end at the furthest. I'm not the...
Let me then...
Good. What time is it? Of the BBC. I just want Lyndon Johnson of America once said the makeup of the people who own the means of production. Entities, building our own captains of industry. We spoke, for an example, about launched a black industrialist program, but how far did we go with that project? In ensuring that you have black captains of industry. Instead of us going to Sanlam and to say, this stake, do you think those people will actually ever disrupt themselves and do anything to reduce their dominance on the economy? The answer is to make sure that, but it is indeed transformative. It doesn't matter whether you read the employment equity report, to check whether employment emission, you'll see there's a regression. While there were just about 3% of companies, I think in 2020, that were 2019, black-owned, fully black-owned in the JSE, there's none. Currently, there's nothing. And it does require black people so that they are able to, is that in the last 20, remember they were poor and all of that. By making the right kind of decisions and ensuring that they embarked on an export-led growth, they made their unemployment problem and their poverty other people's problems. They were able to identify opportunities for local sectors and companies that are owned domestically in their own countries. I want to make an example and say, Comrade Pakstow, in 2018 we adopted the African Free Trade Area Agreement. In 2019, it was March 2018, fast forward to 2019, we say it must come into effect in May. It came into effect, and later on the AU did a review and said, well, no one has actually implemented anything insofar as the African Free Trade Agreement area, so let's come up with an initiative and call it a guided trade initiative, right? To encourage countries, and one of the meetings was held in South Africa. And here we're talking about the size of a market in Africa that is 3.4 trillion US dollars that we can access as one of the most sophisticated economies in Africa. They keep on saying Nigeria is the biggest. I disagree. We're still the largest and the most sophisticated. But guess what? When they did a review last year, there are 8 countries who have actually started implementing that. South Africa is not one of them. South Africa is not one of them. In other words, how do we make sure that, what kind of support should government be providing as an answer to some of those questions, to say access to new markets, access to new sector, classy economics, right, as a tenderpreneur, or that because you are black, there's a preconception that there's something wrong with your intelligence, or you are the incompetent or less intelligent. We deploy them properly in support of our own business people in different sectors in which they play, encourage them, make it playing a very post office so that people have access to finance and banking services. And then you say, when you pass that act, and say, it's the same thing where you have developed, they operate on shoestring budgets. But not only that, even when you come, apart from them operating on shoestring budgets, the thing is that they ask you for the same information that your normal financial institutions would ask you for when you need funding. In other words, there's no way that we can be able to develop black business people without us sitting around the table as various stakeholders to say what's happening in various, and allow black people to be captains of industry. It is for that reason that we keep on saying there is no way that because there are challenges with the current frame that are different from most of us. We don't even have of government. There are different role players. We should, you know, one of the things that needs to be done properly, Comrade Tau, is that we can't have black professionals. We celebrate black victimized. This age spoke English with an accent, and they came there with all the bells and whistles because they are black or white. That amount of resistance that we must be unapologetic in our own country and in we speak is price fixing, collusion, and whatever else that they want to do. And whenever they are caught out, they get a slap on the wrist. And the markets that we should be serving, without being apologetic about it. If poverty is black, has a color, in South Africa, poverty is black. Whether people like to vote for us or not, whether we're in the front pages of newspapers or not, we simply do not care. We're here for the upliftment and the betterment of the lives of our people. Siyabulela.
Thank you very much, TP, for that articulation of the position of the UDM on this very important matter. Colleagues, in the interest of time, let me also Velenkosini Hlabisa. President, over to you.
The BBC, our main audience in this conference. 2023 marks 20 years since the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act came into existence. It is to note that our government this week, Nedbank, one of the South Africa's major banks, cut its South Africa growth forecast, owing uncertainty around the statistics South Africa. Total employment decreased by 97,022 and March 2023. Unfortunately, when there are fewer jobs, there are always more in need, struggling to make ends meet. Over the 20 years that the PPE Act has been in effect, the number of South Africans who depend, according to the most recent stats of SA General Household Survey, the percentage of individuals, 31%, objectives are good, but the Act has failed. One, to increase broad-based, to promote a higher growth rate, increase employment, and more equitable income. This Act to achieve one, duplication. There must be investing and competition in the Department of Small Business Development. Two, the government must devolve more money to municipalities which are closer to the small and emerging black businesses. This money must be ring-fenced to benefit black businesses only and be closely monitored. This will to cater for the emerging voters during the were requested women more money must devolve from monitoring and easy access for the black businesses in the areas where they reside and operate. The IFP further requested all our municipalities, in order to ensure support to black businesses, they must support local procurement and procurement from black-owned SMMEs, but follow the correct procurement process. We believe this is how the PPE Act can be made successful to ensure jobs creation and the economic growth. The IFP acknowledges the importance of the contribution and views the success goals of the PPE Act of empowering black entrepreneurs. The Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Commission must be capacitated with regards to monitoring activities that is done by the Commission. According to the Portfolio Committee, the Commission's Program 2, which deals with the implementation enforcement field, it is not going to be able to support black business people or to respond. The PPE is to return supported in order to have enough manpower in order, as the IFP, we aim to target to be free economically and for the entrepreneurs to effectively participate in the South African economy. The IFP believes we must have the politics of our country right. Load shedding, the government of the day, it is the responsibility there.
Very important to call upon Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi.
Thank you very much. In a day. This losing is consistent with BEE. BEE. I think that perhaps the facts speak for themselves. BEE is less than 3% are black owned, 100% black owned. Women ownership is even worse. Actually, BEE is largely a black boys club, consistent with the white boys club that owns all of us. The tragedy from the very beginning was the naivety to think that the oppressor can give you the means to defeat him. BEE is based on that tragic logic. If you look at the sector targets, are themselves very much embarrassing. Nothing in terms of the ownership of the economy of South Africa reflects the demographic. We are still not targeted. It tells you its nature. How could you depend on people whose intention, whose entire project in life is the pursuit of money for money? So it was naive in our view from the beginning to think you could ask South Africa's white capitalist owners to include, number one, black people, number two, to transform the economy against their own domination. We've got to look elsewhere. So as the EFF, which were proudly a politically socialist organization, we don't have any hopes that BEE can transform the economy. Doesn't the developed countries. Number one, how are we going to transform South Africa? We got to go look what Euro-America did at the center of the recovery before they privatized under Thatcher is the faith that everybody must get to build internal state capacity to deliver the services that are supposed to be delivered by a government. Government must build a road because it must not only build a road, it must maintain it. Government must provide quality education. Government must be able to cut the grass in all the parks, all those low-hanging fruits. You cannot deliver them to the private sector. And what becomes the state role in the creation of big business? Proper business, innovative business. Not chance takers who are busy asking, proper business. Black people can't participate in innovative businesses for a very simple reason. Because you don't have a bank of your own. The South African banks don't believe in you. They don't believe in black tar of our own. So step number one, we need a bank. And that bank must become a state bank. That is going to give you, that is going to waste money on you, like the apartheid government without a Toyota in the world. But if you look at the story of Toyota, it was properly supported by the state for 40 years. Until it became the giant that it is. The sector in the world is in the United States, but is the most protected from international competition. We cannot give up on the state because the ANC destroyed it. It is the only thing you have as black people. You can't fold your arms and all go into a mode of condemning government. It is the only shield, it is the only gain of the liberation movement. We've got to build state capacity. We've got to use the government. We've got to use the state to transform our lives. White people are not going to develop you. White people are not going to save you. To become the rich people that they are, they were protected by the state. They were funded by the state. They were given all types of opportunities by the state. You have to save your state. Don't surrender it to corrupt people. Don't surrender it to people who don't believe in black talent. We've got to save the state and strengthen it. Use it to transform and shift tectonically the ownership patterns in the country. In the private sector, you will not survive. You will not succeed. So number one, we must build our state internal capacity, build state-owned companies. Finally, we cannot continue calling this place our country when we do not own the land. Actually, the most untransformed of the sectors in terms of this BEE arrangement is the agricultural sector. Land is everything. Kwamanje nje, we're on the land. Even if you want a saloon, it has to be on the land. perhaps that is the genesis of everything. Without the land, we are visitors in this country. You can hate foreign nationals all you want. There are people who are campaigning everywhere, program director, that our problem. We've got to get back the land. We do not have the land. And therefore, I appeal, I invite all of us as black people to be unapologetic. Even if your interests are entrepreneurial in relation to the fourth industrial revolution, you will not be able to even do the fourth industrial revolution without the land. You don't have land. That's why the banks won't give you funding, because you don't have the land. We have to get back our land. We have to build internal state capacity and use the state to transform the economy. Thirdly, we need our own bank. That is the path to economic freedom in our lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ndlozi. Thank you very much for that input from the economic freedom fighters. Ladies and gentlemen, the big political corner is about festival of ideas. We've had ideas. Your political leaders that you have voted to represent you in parliament are here. They now want to hear from you. We will start with the questions session. We're going to take 3-3. Ne? I see this side is a bit underrepresented. So we will shift the resources this way. Ma'am, you'll be number 1, number 2, the young gentleman, and number 3, the gentleman there. Come to this mic here. All 3 of you. That okay. The young man, come. Young man, come. The last gentleman there, please come to the mic here. We'll take 3 this side as well. 1, 2. Where's the third one from this side? Okay, I'll shift 1. Me, when I'm me, Togamu. Yes. It will be 1, 2, 3. Ma'am, we are starting with you. Let's go.
Whoa.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Okay, the mic was a bit loud. I do have a very loud voice. Libito laka ke Sindim Kuteni, CEO at Kuji Consulting, an entrepreneur in this very difficult trade environment. I appreciate the panelists. You are talking from a macro environment level in terms of this BEE topic. I'm going to talk at a micro level. Small businesses are facing big challenges. I loved the ANC with all my heart, with everything. In actual fact, if you go into my Twitter page, you will realize I've got a picture with Cyril Ramaphosa, Gwede Mantashe. You can name it all. Because I believed in the ANC, that the ANC can actually change the lives of many people. Particularly, I'm an educated woman. I've got a master's degree, looking to do my PhD. I worked in industry, in the ICT industry, and decided, you know what? I want to make a difference. I want to be that woman that employs 20,000 young people in this economy. So I didn't take a chance. I didn't just wake up, took the easy way, wanted to be a entrepreneur. I studied while an entrepreneur, using my entrepreneurial funds to fund my studies. Now, I've given you a whole biography of Cindy, because I want you to understand what I'm not standing up here just to make noise, but the ANC leadership is failing small businesses terribly. I'll give you an example. I'm quite sure somewhere there is a black book that ANC leaders have listed. Right with you, and you don't like Cindy, and therefore Cindy will not ever get business in this economy. That black book, can it come to light?
Thank you very much, Ms. Cindy. All future speakers now. Your name, straight to the question. Story retractable through. Name, question. Thank you.
My name is Vumile Mbonani. I wanted to ask the Deputy Minister of the DA, as a young black South African, and currently a student, I wanted to ask, please explain to me why should I subscribe to the policies of the DA that include a race that election, like there are no opportunities. How will the DA be different from this government? Thank you.
Thank you, Amen. Gentlemen.
I'm from Umhlabe Lingana. My question is, how do we give money to the hands of the corrupt leaders? Because the reality is, the people that hinders our economic inclusion is the leadership. So if you're giving me opportunity, but then you give someone that an authority to give me money or an opportunity without voting, because even if we vote, we know what happens. You, Mr. Ndlozi, you mentioned the business, like the Black Business Bank, like the government individually, to lead you or to provide for you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. At the back.
Igama ngibongani Kaluvalo, from School Rashushu, we manufacture and sell school shoes. 10 questions reduced in.
10 placards,
Lutuli house is about to be sold. How can we trust you if you can't keep your house in order? EFF, can you guys hold on to the policy of removing borders and we start with the three, pillars, the one of land and the one of the state bank and the state pharmaceutical? Then maybe we can trust you in 2024.
Thank you, Klaus.
Thank you. My name is Mashudu Mande from the company called Zonaka, and I'm a former DTIC. So to the ANC, how do you expect BEE to work while the ANC itself is not supporting BEE? For an example, we are gathered here as BBC. We don't have one of our key stakeholders, which is the DTIC. They are not the campaign things. BEE will work. We currently have the DTIC that have the BEE unit, which have about 5 employees permanently who are supposed to drive transformation in the country. How is that possible? Thank you.
Madam.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Hitbush. My question is to the DA. I think I sat there and I was very arrogant, So my question is, with regards to, where do you stand in terms of Black consciousness? Because for me, your speech was telling us that we need to be at a bigger seat, and we are not beggars. We need to be at the table. We need to be saying, this is our land. We will participate whether you like it or not. And I like what the EFF said. The oppressor will not empower you. So you stood there and you basically told us that systematic racism must still continue through the SDG. What's your stand on Black consciousness?
Thank you, ma'am. So in this round, the questions were directed to the ANC, the DA, and the EFF. We'll start with the ANC. Comrade Tau, you do have a mic next to you. Please.
Well, thank you very much. In my input, I thought I would have elaborated on the broader functionation, fiscal and other tools as a means through which the state achieves certain objectives. This includes, of course, regulations and legislation such as broad-based Black economic empowerment. It would be far-fetched to suggest that Black people have not actively started to participate in the economy, started owning shares, started owning enterprises, grown in terms of employment equity, and the list goes on and on. That in fact, not only view this framework and enhance wave of entrepreneurs that participated in the equity transactions, but to have continuous, because part of our problem is this self-flagellation that we have as a nation. That in fact, that's why I started by saying part of the problem is we look at every Black entrepreneur that has received a state tender as a tenderpreneur and look down on them. Now we must stop looking down on us, whether the taking, nor the ANC doesn't always control everything. More critical bodies that we have engaged with continually.
Mhlekazi Notata.
Thank you so much for the 2 questions. I just want to get the names correct. Policies of the DA that include white people, how will we be different? People always say, DA policies, we don't understand them, why should we subscribe to them? But if I encouraged you now as a young person, as a student like me, I'm no longer a student business,
running it successfully, but also in the arena, making sure that a person like you and me that come from rural Tsolo is able to get the equal opportunities that people that were advantaged in the past get them. The policies of the DA talk about economic justice, this particular policy. And it basically says that we need equal, where you still have children dying in pit, measure them based on SDG opportunity, to actually interrogate what we say about job creation, what we say about the economy, what we say about redress, particularly when we talk about the SDG failed. Even the school that was built there, and if you make a meaningful contribution in your own community, we are able to uplift people to have the skills that they need to be able to compete in the economy, to be able to participate, the knowledge of that, then ultimately you are empowered, not to be dependent on somebody else. Then the question from Usisi, who's saying she was holding, and I think I indirectly answered your question in the previous one. What we're encouraging here is not for us to be beggars. It's for us to be empowered. And how you empower people is by dealing with the root causes of the issue. If I'm the access, then I'm doomed before I even begin. If I'm not in a community whereby companies that come in terms of, let's keep the pockets of excellence of black business, and ultimately the rest of the people, which is broad, should then not benefit from that. And our argument here is saying that if you deal with the SD, look, through education, you are making sure that they get the right benefiting to uplift that particular community. And that's what the SDGs talk about. And sometimes I think we don't interrogate this information. We look at the brand and the logo of a political party and make an assumption that because I'm a black person, by the color of my skin, but to say the color of my skin and the people that I grew up with to be able to run a business like that. So that is basically what we need to empower people to do in our different communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Commissar Dozie.
1, 2. Thank you. Program Director, allow me to also bend like my sister, because I think that there is a misunderstanding, regardless of how capacitated I am, of how people in South Africa with surety are not struggling because they are not smart. They are not simply naive. Those are the core facts. Problem of corruption in South Africa, that the criminal justice are not doing their job, the courts are not doing their job, and I think that we've got to fix that. We've got to deal with that in the private sector. We've got to deal with crime, including corruption. That's not an excuse to say we don't need a state-owned bank. A bank whose purpose is going to be, we are going to fund black people. Now, one of the bad assumptions that the gentleman of the DA makes is that when you are saying to government, give us a protection as infant businesses, that you must go look at the profile of the PIC. Who the PIC is funding. Historically, who has the PIC not begging? Are they begging when they are asking government to protect them from the draconian policies of white monopoly capital? They are not begging. It's not begging, it's how governments everywhere in the world work. The final point I want to make is regarding the state-owned bank. You know, the South African law does not allow for government to own at the moment. I don't know whether it was one of the sunset clauses deals or what, but legislation doesn't allow South Africa, my brother. It's simple. I've got a brilliant idea. I've got a brilliant product. I've done the research. I go to a bank and I ask, please, can you give me funding? That is the biggest problem of black businesses. You wouldn't need the funding. If it was willing to waste money on you, you wouldn't need to be included by white businesses. You will be able to start your own sectors. You will be able to start and finish big corporations. So at the center of the problem that we have is not skills. Stop telling us to go to school. We've been to school. We're very ngwadid, by the way. Stop telling us that we need skills. We are skilled. In fact, we are led by a lot of incompetent white people who did not go to reality. Black conscious, black in the world, to be conscious of your blackness. Thank you.
Deputy President Kwangwa.
Chairperson, thank you very much.
I did say earlier that the problem is that we want to continue to go and cry at wrong funerals. Because our obsession is that we would rather own shares in a white company rather than having interventionist policies that are going to help people to participate. But I wanted to deal with that one point and say implicit in the open opportunity society for all vision is the assumption that the level of readiness among our people to take advantage of opportunities that such a society would provide is the same, when the starting points are not the same. It's important, all the sectors of society, all companies, the multinational corporations that we see today, they are where they are because at some point their governments has protected them for as long as it was possible to do so before they exposed them to international competition. I want to address this issue of systematic racism. There was an instant, an opportunity to supply fuel to Malawi, to the government of Malawi. There were few companies that were to obtain a bank guarantee. All they needed was a bank guarantee. Supply issues, all the other issues had been taken care of. Guess what? They couldn't get a single guarantee, get a single bank in South Africa to guarantee them of the amount of money, a fraction of the amount of money they had, and they were able to get a guarantee. Guess what? Because they had the right people on board, different skin color. Others were black, they had money, they could not buy insurance to be able to get the bank guarantee, and others did not have, they had limited resources. But in their team, those Indian guys had white people. The same banks in South Africa who could not provide them with bank guarantees, provided bank guarantees to the other group. That's a systematic racism that black people face in general. The other issue is, there was a question about small business, saying, we don't think this government is taking small businesses seriously. And that's the truth. It's the truth. But consider this thing to just illustrate the point. There's that department, Yemipanga. All they do is to say, as they once said, condolences. The department Yemipanga, it gets a budget of 6 billion rands, but you don't even know what they are doing with it. Important as arts and culture is to society. And then small business, guess what the annual budget of the department is? 2.5 billion rands. And then you have a small business division that would proudly say, this year we're targeting to assist 1,333 small businesses. And then we're supposed to to clap and ululate because they have that target. But in essence, what it means is that each province is expected to assist 14 businesses per annum. 14 small businesses per annum. And then we celebrate these figures because we are given them in aggregates. We don't actually interrogate them to say, what do they actually mean for the development of our country and the amount of resources we allocate to departments and units that are supposed to actually be able to help us to drive this development. The last time I checked, I stand under correction. Even the National Empowerment Fund, if they got capital injection, they probably got it recently, but for the longest period, they didn't get funding from government to be able to do economic empowerment. So the challenge we have is that we keep on wanting to expect. I even made this example earlier. I said, we expect the private sector to disrupt itself. It does not have an obligation to transform society or to even transform itself. Hence, you find that the South African economy is owned predominantly by the same club, by the same people. They sit in each other's boards, and they decide policies and the corporate governance models that are going to follow in their companies, and they don't care where you come from because we keep wanting to go and cry at their funerals or do toalatas at their events and companies when they announce their annual financial statements, when you are going to get absolutely nothing from it. Thank you.
President Tlhabisa.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I just want to comment on two things. The first one, issue of a state bank. Those who know, there is Itala Bank, which operates in KwaZulu-Natal only. Itala Bank is a brainchild of the IFP, which was established by Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the founder of the IFP. We are off-port black business people only. We are of the view, Mfowethu Ndlozi, that Itala Bank should be upgraded because it gets more support from the provincial government into a national bank. So on the idea of a state bank, we firmly agree on that one because Itala Bank is one vehicle that managed to support black people to get into business. Well, unfortunately now, it is a victim of corrupt leaders of the day in KwaZulu-Natal. I wanted to say that one as a first point. Secondly, uPhakamani from Umhlabiyalingana, because you know, even if you vote, and then he said you know, I can conclude, he wanted to say, even if you vote, you can't remove them. That is not true. In South Africa, we have 14 million voters registered who do not go to cast their vote. That 14 million, if those people can stand up and say, enough is enough to corruption, enough is enough to a political party that has killed our country, you can remove corrupt leaders. Secondly, we have 13 million unregistered voters in South Africa. If the 14 million can stop crying and lamenting too much with ANC, but the ANC has destroyed everything. I'm not talking to as people who are involved in business. Let us get politics of our country right. By removing a failed government, it is, if we want to get the economy of our country right, get politics of the country right. Phakamani, go and vote and remove corrupt people. You will see a change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, time is the enemy. We'll have loved to take a second round, but we have completely run out of time. What we are going to do is to give our political leaders an opportunity to make closing remarks. And then we can, of course, interact with them as they exit the stage. I'm going to start with Comrade Parks for your closing remarks, Comrade Parks. 2 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much. I thought I should say a bit of examples of practical interventions, small business development initiatives. When we spoke about accelerating the implementation of the current legislative framework, we also took advantage of practical lessons that we have learned through, for example, also address where this black country. The second is that there is dedicated, targeted procurement from those black enterprises and the private sector, and therefore incubate these enterprises and finance them. The third is the establishment of a fund, which is the Township Economy Fund, that is designed such that it leverages both public and private sector capital to ensure access to finance by black enterprises. So it's not a far-fetched idea, it's something that we have done. It is something that we initiated and is being driven and implemented. Now, when we talk about actually deploying public policy, it is also about how we introduce fiscal tools. We went actively to the Minister of Finance when I was in Gauteng to say we need a version of the 12 over and above the state to ensure access to financing, and you create policies and regulations around it. So it's a deliberate, conscious intervention. In fact, the Gauteng provincial government at the time took a position that we will forego part of our equitable share so that it goes to entrepreneurs. And last, coming to the point of skills, I think it would be disingenuous to suggest that, in fact, there hasn't been a focus on skills development. Whether this is about looking at the BBBE Act as a legislative tool that ensures that there is an element of deployment of resources into skills development. So it's not only the state, you need to look at the broadest array.
I can almost guarantee you talking about. The mistake we make is that, yes, we're here in this audience, but it's not only us that are black in this country. There are people that are left out of opportunity because of the policies that we have that only benefit a few. So when we talk about economic empowerment, we must not forget abantu bangancwadanga okanye bengenathuba loncwada. And I think that's where the problem is. And then people want to talk about consciousness. So it's important for us to develop policy that talks directly to us being able to get tools to access economic opportunity. And that's what we stand for when we talk about the SDG. To be empowered so that they can participate in the economy. The second thing is that there is a biasness in our policy that talks about we need to do a means test for those particular companies who are predominantly going to be these particular companies' opportunity. The same means test that is utilized when you go and apply for NSFAS. It maybe in your generation was called TEFSA, but in ours it was NSFAS. But it's the same phenomenon. And we're asking that the Black Business Council and the guests that are here to engage us as a Democratic Alliance. Because our intention is to ensure that South Africa is a prosperous nation where we manage the equality of opportunity and not the equality of outcomes. Because that's where we lose it and we benefit a few rather than benefiting the majority. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Plas. President Tlhabisa.
My just last comment is that, one, the BBC as an organization, you must be vocal enough on behalf of the black business people. Stand up. Your voice must be heard by the government. And secondly, to you as black entrepreneurs, you must not think that the government will make things easier for you. Be part of challenging the government, holding it accountable. I like my brother there, who raised the issue that DTI has to. And if you have a government that does not respond where it has to, be part of removing it. To get the economy thriving, the environment good for you. Participate in getting politics of the country right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Tlhabisa. Deputy President Kongo.
Because then the president, your president, is working to establish a 10 billion rands fund to support SMMEs. They will provide government 2.5 billion and they expect the other 7.5 billion in transformation. The other issue is, you're saying it's going to come from the private sector, which is very strange because the private sector has not supported any of your initiatives so far. If they have, they've done so to a limited extent. But when you wanted to fund, bail out SMMEs and give it to it. But when we must support small businesses and entrepreneurs, what do we say? We put our faith in the private sector. That's being dishonest. The adaptation, and then be able to demand packages and support programs from government to continue mechanisms and other interventions that we make on the African continent and the rest of the world for that matter. Thank you very much.
Commissar Ndlozi.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think that it's very sad for Comrade Parks to have responded to the absence of a government entity the way he did. But you represent the ruling party here. I mean, the best they will force them to come living here very sad with that march in order, not leave business, anything in the world, anything in life. They don't have to be too educated. For instance, the leader of, break his head because he's white. White people don't have to do much. So we're not saying really in relation to there are people in the town. The problem with at least where I come from, and I've worked all over South Africa, is that I know in my own class at Skolwe, there were more smarter kids than me who were getting, I remember them, some of which are now loitering in the streets because the system would not allow a majority of us to enter. It already, as a predetermination, only allows the few. So it's not because of your hard work or you are special or because of anointing. It's the system. And the system has to be changed. So I'm not going to leave here with the idea in the head of black people that they are the problem. It's the biggest, most important point for me. If you have to forget everything that I said, we need a bank. We need a bank. Okay, leave other, let's just, all of us, gather in 2024 at the voting stations and vote for anyone who's going to start a bank, going to give money to, because we already have the money, but we are not organizing it in the financial sector in order to re-genesis of transformation. Without it, every effort is futile. It's organized capital that we must organize through a bank. Willingness to start a bank, they are too scared, and I don't know. He can tweak the willingness of, because they won't be so that it is run properly and we punish harshly people who steal public funds. That's the philosophy, that's the formula.
As they are here, they are having a listening brief because the minister could not make it. But I think that's the problem, Comrade Tau, that the minister of the ANC does not make time to come here and cancel his engagements, because we are talking about a key policy to empower black people in this country, of companies in the economy. So this piece of legislation is key for our people to succeed, both in business and those that have got their own career paths. So, Comrade, we must be not engaging with us. Who are they engaging with? Us, who are they talking to? Liboma. So we need to get that one right. Because in our entrepreneurs, we are entrepreneurs. Because those who are corrupt on the other side are not called tenderpreneurs. It's only us who are called tenderpreneurs. So Raibena. Next time I kopane how to tenderpreneurs raunsa. Koluit thola boregenyan and then come back after cooling off. Number two, my favorite refrain on this podium says that we need to work together with our government. Really so. There's no goodwill, colleagues. There is no goodwill. So government must listen to us and work together with us if there's any hope of transforming this economy. So, Comrade Parks, when we say, when we now amend this act, it must be compulsory. Let it be so. If you are not listening to us, the beneficiaries, who are you listening to? Because we can't be lectured by white business on black economic empowerment. They can't. We refuse to be lectured by them. One issue that is always being said is that, you see, B benefits a few people. Now my question is, who is selling the assets to those few people? Because we don't own the assets. Government doesn't own the assets. The asset owners who are white are the ones that are creating this special class of people who are called what? Usual suspects. Only balance sheet. This special class, they get vendor financed. They don't have to implement it right. Let's implement it the way it was meant. Let me repeat. It does not end with you. How to the shares? Also the owner, a company. It does not end with you. That's why we have 5 pillars. When I get to participate in ownership, spend you. This policy must be implemented. It does not end with you. Thank you very much.
For a picture, you know, the VPB, Vice President Business, is abusing my stage.